It's from Day Stanko, I think. German name, I believe. And he writes, my family lives in Germany, where local government is seen as one of the highest callings. In my experience, Americans tend to only care about government on two levels, county and federal. I've yet to meet someone whose dream is to be a city councilman, but I have met many folks who want nothing more than to work in the Beltway. With America as the birthplace of institutionalized bottom-up governance, is this obsession with federal over local politics just a sign of the times? What are your thoughts? That's a profoundly good question there, Day. The reason that becoming an official of some kind in Germany is looked up to, because bureaucrats are looked up to, and bureaucrats are looked up. The word I remember during the Iraq invasion, somewhere in 2003 or 4, it was a statistic published that something like 70% of all the French people thought that bureaucrat was a compliment. That to be a bureaucrat was something to be looked up to. Americans are like, what? And so the first thing in terms of understanding this difference is you have to understand the founding nature of the United States. Germany is a great example, by the way. So Germany, I don't have to tell you this, was composed of scores, maybe even 100 or more little duchies and free towns and little kingdoms of this and little kingdoms of that, and there's a little giant patchwork quilt. Prussia's a big one, Bavaria's a pretty big one, and then you've got things that are literally a town, just a one town. It's its own government, it's not part of another, it's its own country. And so in Germany, when Bismarck pulls all these things together and he creates a unified Germany, and how does the average German know that it's a unified Germany and not still a collection of 50, 60 different principalities? Well, it's because the flag comes down, right? The principality flag comes down, and the German flag goes up, and that flag represents the German Reich, and Bismarck, and all of that. And so if you live in a society like that, it's the government that brings order to things. It's the government that pushes away starvation and warfare, and it's the government that basically restores order and gives you a sense of security and a sense of stability, all of that. And in Europe, you're coming out of feudalism. I mean, you can go back before the Middle Ages, but it doesn't make any sense really, because modern Western culture the Middle Ages changed everything so much that going back to the Middle Ages, before the Middle Ages, doesn't really matter. But in any event, what are you dealing with? You're dealing with authoritarian structures, both of two kinds. In all of Europe, you're dealing with the secular authoritarian structures, which might be your local baron, or your local count, or your local duke, or your local earl, or whatever. And if you've got a pretty decent beat, maybe your local duke of Earl. But you've got all of these warring factions, and at the same time, you have an extremely powerful church. They didn't call it the Catholic Church then, because there was nothing to compare Catholic Church against. It was just the church. It was the church. They owned everything. When I say they owned everything, they owned the thought cycles. And the church and the dukes and the barons had a deal, and the deal was the secular people, the warriors, Henry V and those kind of guys, said, all right, we'll grant you all kinds of land to the church, and we'll grant you a great deal of riches, and you'll be able to levy something that looks like taxes, and we won't tax you, and you'll become fabulously wealthy, and you can set up all these monasteries and cathedrals and all the rest of this stuff. We'll help you build all of that. And in exchange for that, we only want one thing, really. And what we want is we want you to tell people that it's God's will that we're in power. That's all we want in exchange. We're going to give you all of this gilded gold and everything. We're going to give you all of this stuff forever, for centuries and centuries and centuries. And all we ask from the clergy in response is we need them to tell the common people that it's God's will that I am the king. God's will. It's the divine right of kings. Because if you got that, then the peasants are not nearly so likely to revolt. They're not just revolting against Prince Bill here. They're revolting against God. It's heresy. It's blasphemy. You're going to go to hell for eternity if you decide to revolt against me. That's why I preferentially would like to see all peasants just essentially put down, because they're very unruly, and the next thing you know, if you don't rule them with an iron fist, they'll start getting uppity. So all of this stuff leads to a strong central state in Europe. And what I just said is really kind of important, Because if you do rule people with an iron hand, there are some people who will get uppity. There are some people that don't like being ruled, and there are some people who don't like the fact that I'm working from before sunrise till after sunset, and I'm growing these miserable little potatoes, and I've got this scrawny chicken, and I have to go walk in front of this lord, and I have to place at his disposal, half of the work I do or 3/4 of the work I do, and then on top of it, if he decides to go to war over somebody because he likes his wife, I'm expected to pick up a halberd or something or an axe and go and fight in his wars for personal glory and gain, which does nothing for me except maybe keep out bandits. That's a pretty poor deal. And so when you finally have this new world come along, this is a whole world. This is so important. The new world was populated by Indians, but they had no government. There was no civilization here. There was a civilization in South America and in Central America, the Aztecs and the Mayans and the Incas. But in North America, there's nothing. These nomadic tribes, which meant essentially no government. And for the first time in human history, you had this open park that nobody lives in. So who's going to go and live in this park? Well, it's going to be the uppity people who don't like being told what to do. Because if you've got 100 peasants and everyone hates being a peasant and everybody hates giving all of this stuff to the czar or the priest or the emir or the shah or the whatever, and you've got 100 people that hate it because they all hated it. No one was in favor of it, and what is the right to senior, the fact that your local noble had the right to sleep with your bride. Your local noble had the right to have the first shot at your virgin bride. That's because it's good to be the king. So nobody likes this, and everybody hates it. And the question is, what happens throughout centuries and centuries of people hating it? Most people are afraid, and most people put up with it, because even though it's awful, you're at least alive. But some people decide that we'd rather make the kind of risk that may cost us our lives, but in exchange for that risk, we might get our freedom. And those people got on boats. And then they got on airplanes, and they came here. And the reason they came here is because there was nobody else here. They got to build it from scratch. They got to build it from nothing. It was a blank sheet of paper, and it didn't have anything on it, and they got to just start with a blank sheet of paper. But this country was created by people who ran away from governments, not out of cowardice. They understood that, look, we can start a peasant uprising here, and I'll just simply be burned at the stake, and nothing's going to change. So let's go someplace we've never been before, start a new group. And so when you understand, Day, that not just the founding fathers of America, but up until like right now, there are people getting off of airplanes to start a new life here because they couldn't take it back home. I was in New York not too long ago. I was on one of these pedal cabs, and I met a young man, 20-year-old guy, and he just cornered me, just wouldn't let me go. I said, all right, I was going to walk back to the hotel, so I get in the back of this cab with this guy, and he's pedaling along, and he says, my name is Omar, I think. Where are you from? I'm from Kazakhstan. No, that's awesome, dude. He's working hard. These are big, heavy taxi cabs, and they're pedal things, and I'm in the back, and he's working us through rain, and he's really working hard. And I said, so how'd you get here? He says, we just got on a plane and came here, and this is the land of dreams, and I'm 22, and my whole life is in front of me, and I'm going to work really hard, and I'm going to find a way to do it. And look, I know he was violating his tourist visa. I understand that. And I understand that he's an illegal alien, and I'm against illegal immigration. But he was here for the same reason that the people who traditionally come here have come here, which is, I'm not satisfied at home, and I think if I work hard enough, I can then lead a better life. So he got on a plane. It's not like he got on his plane to visit the relatives in the mansion that they have here in New York. He got on a plane. He doesn't know what the hell New York is going to look like. He doesn't know anything about it. Doesn't know what John F. Kennedy terminal is going to look like. He doesn't know how he's going to get from the airport to wherever the hell he's going to live. He doesn't know where he's going to live. Doesn't know what he's going to do. But he could not stand the fact that he was staying there and watching the only life he had rot away because of the inaction and the cruelty and the ignorance of the world he grew up in. He decided to do something about it. I admire people like that very much. And if we could exchange every one of those guys for a Berkeley professor, we'd be in fine shape very soon. And that's the whole country, Dave. The whole country is built upon people who made that decision at one point or another. For me, that decision wasn't made by me, and it wasn't made by my father. It was made by my father's father, my grandfather, Joseph Whittle, sorry, who came here as a family of 7 in 1915. I want to say, no, it was 1911. Came in 1911, and 4 or 5 of the kids came, and then they set up an advanced base camp, and they went through Ellis Island, and then the rest of the family came over once they'd found a little tiny little house for them all to live in. So at some point, all of us here in this country, all of us are the result of people who just took a chance. And it turns out there is a risk-taking gene, and somebody I knew used to be able to tell me it was expressed on a certain allele or whatever. They really knew what they were doing. But there is, in fact, a gene that codes for risk-taking, and I bet you anything, if you took a sample of the American population, you would find that gene far predominant here than anywhere else in the world. But I also think you'd find that that gene is not nearly as prevalent now as it was 50 years ago. And the reason that I say that is because we are no longer first, second generation immigrants, and we're no longer running from tyranny, or we're no longer running from economic poverty. We now are a country that's gone, 60, 70 years without a major war, with the exception of 9/11, which is a one-off attack. We've never had our cities bombed and stuff, and we've never known any hardship. And the kids who are raised today, if you're a teenager today, you've had 24-hour air conditioning. The temperature's been exactly what you determined it to be. You've never been cold and you've never been hot. You've never been hungry, not for a minute in your life. If you're a modern American millennial, you have never been hungry a day in your life. And when you come home and say, I'm starving, that means you're mildly peckish compared to real hunger. And you've never been in serious pain. And certainly if you are in serious pain, you're going to be in serious pain for an hour at the most, maybe, until they get you to the hospital and knock you out and fix your broken bones or whatever. And so when you start from that, high, where do you go? When my ancestors came over here, my grandfather's not exactly my ancestor, but when they came over here, electricity was still a pretty new deal, and so was running water. So if you worked very hard all your life and you had to light smoky little candles or little oil lamps, and suddenly you could come home and go, ta-da, and it's like daylight in there, that is an earth-shaking improvement in your life. And it's an incentive to work harder. But why should kids born today work harder? They have everything. They don't, there's nothing for them to work for, and there's certainly nothing for them to risk their lives for. So they take all of it for granted. And like every other civilization, it rots from the head down. The elites put their kids in special schools, and the elites are, by definition, driving around in limousines, and they don't have to deal with problems of milk being too expensive, and the elites don't have to deal with issues of, how are we going to make ends meet, or college costs too much money. They don't deal with any of that. They're just set for life, and their kids are set for life, and every generation they get worse, and they're in charge. And the one thing I'm going to close this show on, I try to close on it every time I can, this is the cycle of civilization. It's 100, 200, 300 years maybe of slow growth, of hard work, of patriotism, heroism, fighting off enemy tribes, trying to win economic benefits, and slowly, Babylon becomes dominant, or Egypt becomes dominant, or Greece becomes dominant, or Rome becomes dominant, or Spain becomes dominant, or France becomes dominant, or Britain becomes dominant, and there's a bunch of other examples too. Very, 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 very slow climb, and then when they're at the peak of their powers, when they dominate the world, and there's nothing else that could be considered their competitors, when you would think that after all of this struggle, now that they are the most powerful nation in the world, militarily, culturally, politically, economically, you would think that at that point then they'd go up into orbit. That thing, now we don't have any competition. We're out of here. That's not what happens. It just collapses overnight. Collapses overnight because there's too much comfort and there's too much security, and you take everything for granted. You ask these millennials about freedom and capitalism, and they'll tell you capitalism is horrible and unfair, and they'll tell you that the First Amendment right to free speech is an abomination because it hurts people's feelings. And the reason they do that is because they've never had to live under socialism, and they've never had to have their lives treated like a little cog in a machine, have to stand in line for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours to get into a store that may not have anything in it, and they've never had to they've never been enslaved. They've never had to do anything they didn't want to do. Honestly, the worst slavery that modern Americans have known is that you had to go clean your room, or else you didn't get the car for the night. That's it. That's pretty much it. That's the hardship of slavery that we're creating. So when you have people that soft, it's prime for collapse. And this is the way I'd like to close the show, and I'd like to close it every way I can, as often as I can by this. So There's no question that America is in the end stages of civilization. There's no question about it whatsoever. All of the signs are there. All of the moral signs are there. The moral decay is there. All of it's there. And frankly, if it weren't for one thing, I'd just be stocking up on beans and ammo and just go live in the woods. And when it's over, it's Walking Dead. I mean, 9/10 of the country dies of starvation, and whoever's left is left, and all the rest of that. And then you have to wait 500 years, 1,000 years before you have civilization again. By the way, all of those ores that were easy to find and the oil that was just under the ground, that's all gone now. So if you're going to try and build this thing from scratch again, you're not going to have much luck. So why am I not just filled with despair over this? Well, I'm not filled with despair over this because of the Stratosphere Lounge. Because the Stratosphere Lounge is I'm not saying it is going to save America, but it might save America. And what I mean by that is, all of the signs of current America are the fact that the elites have nothing to do with the common people anymore. They will not even tell them if they're mortally ill. They will not tell the citizens of their own country that I've got a very serious sickness, because they think that we don't deserve to know, because we're not citizens anymore. We're subjects, and our job is to go make money so they can spend it. And this is how every civilization has ever fallen. But the difference this time is the Stratosphere Lounge. And what I mean by that is, it's the first time in the history of the world, ever, in the history of civilization, that common people can talk to other common people. That's it. That's all. That's all the internet is. It's a chance for common people to talk to other common people without having to go through the corrupted, bored, suicidal elites. And a perfect example of this is the Hillary picture, the video on 9/11 in the morning. And the reason it's a perfect picture is this: CNN didn't cover that. CNN didn't get the photograph, didn't get the video. And if they had gotten the video, they would never have aired it. They would have buried it, because they're elitists and they have a death wish and they don't like the society and they want to die. It's really that simple. It's why they defend Islam all the time. They want to die. So if it hadn't been for the internet, if you look at the Hillary Clinton moment where she stumbles and collapses, if you look at that as something that has happened all throughout history with various leaders, this is the first time in history ever where common people were there and took pictures of it and sent it to other common people, because that vision, that photographic evidence of the lie didn't have to go through the elite, because if it had, we never would have seen it. You and I would have never seen this footage ever. We would never have seen any of the footage of Hillary coughing. We never would have seen any of the footage of her rolling her eyes at the DNC, or we certainly would have seen it more than once. They don't show the 9/11 footage anymore. They don't want us to get all excited, and they just don't want us to realize what the world is. So, but we did see it, didn't we? We saw it. And as Joe Baseball says, the signal will get out. And I think that's from Firefly Serenity, I'm not sure. But yes, this is the first time ever that this has happened. A regular person with their telephone, 2 of them, just happened to be in the street at the right moment at the right time, and the Democratic candidate for the United States of America cannot stand on her feet, and she's wobbly, and she collapses into this vehicle, and we'd never know about it if it weren't for a regular citizen shooting the picture and sending it up to the internet, where guys like me chew on it and spit it out and make sense out of it, and it goes out to more people on the internet. And I'm not saying that's going to save us, but I'm saying it's different. It's never happened before. You never had that in Rome. You never had that in Greece or Babylon or even the British Empire. If a common citizen saw Caesar fall drunk someplace or whatever, how's he going to tell the rest of the Romans what he saw? He can't do it. It's impossible. There's no technology for it. That gives me a lot of hope, and it's why I stay in business. And again, I'd just like to thank the members, the paying members at BillWhittle.com, because they're parting with money in order to keep this civilization alive. It took me a long time to come to grips with this. It took me a long time to stop feeling bad about asking for support and money, because I was raised not to hold out a hat. But this is going to save the world, or it's not, and nothing else will. So if you want to be a part of that, we'd love to have you. Over at BillWhittle.com, you just click on Become a Member, and you can be part of the team that's not only going to save this country, we're going to get us out of this cycle of history, because power corrupts people, and enough power concentrated over a long enough time leads the people to become so corrupt that they go down and they take everybody down with them. And now we don't have to do that, because we have the Stratosphere Lounge and 1,000 million other outlets. So let's keep the doors open. We're the news media now, not them. CNN's not the news media. They suppress the news. This is the news. You're getting the news right now. And it's a worthy cause. It's the worthy cause. It's the most worthy cause in the world. I'm honored and proud to be a part of it. And I owe all of that to those of you out there who've been fans and watching these videos over the years. And every single view I'm grateful for, and all the kind words, especially in the emails and the Facebook thing, all of that. It means the world to me. But especially the people that have decided to put their money where their mouth is. They put resources that they could have spent on coffee or something and put it here because they think it works. I think it works too. So with that, I think we're going to wrap up episode 130 of the Stratosphere